What's the most disturbing secret you've been told? Girl I knew had just gotten fired from her job and was planning on jumping off a bridge. The job meant everything to her. I talked to her over 4 hours on the phone pleading with her and she eventually decided not to jump. So she went home and shot herself instead. Dad introduced me to his girlfriend when I was 15 years old. Now, don't tell your mama. Same bro. Dad said it was his nurse. The one who treats his sadness. Left me in the mall's computer cafe the whole day and today I realized he probably did some nasty shit with that woman. My friend was telling me about how jealous she was of her boyfriend spending time with one of his female cousins instead of her. I mean, that's his family though. Don't you think you're being a bit psycho getting jealous of him spending time with his own cousin? Well he ducked his other one. I'm sorry. What? Turns out he'd lost his virginity to a different female cousin when they were teenagers. A coworker told me her second child wasn't her husband's. Did not need that information. I think they told you because they needed someone to tell. Just for the sake of telling. That, in turn, would make them feel lighter. But they know inside that the weight will never be lifted off their shoulders. The time will come they realize this and eventually have to tell the truth to their husband. My father had 6 children from 4 different women. One he knocked up when he was married to his first wife. He put the child up for adoption in secret so his wife wouldn't know. The only people who knew were his mom and dad and the mother of the child's family. He lied to his current wife about the child when his second wife found the papers in his office while they were going through a divorce. 30 years later, 23 and reunited all and he found out quickly this secret wasn't really so secret. Everyone in the family knew and just didn't say anything. The child put up for adoption was me. What really sucks for him is if he had just been open about it, it may have saved him many years of pain. In 1994 a now retired judge told me he and 2 childhood friends were responsible for the accidental death of a classmate down by a creek where they were playing one day. He had pretty much kept it to himself for a lifetime. May have had a role to play in his career choice. I've definitely heard of people going into law enforcement because of accidents early on in life that messed with their heads. Sometimes experiences like that can really push a person to want to do more good for the world. A guy I hooked up with in college had a breakdown when we were blackout drunk and essentially admitted to killing a guy who had taken advantage of his little sister and burying the body. He was a total wiener of a guy who was always trying to hype himself up and exaggerate to be a bigger, better, manlier person, so I didn't think much of it at the time. The timing would have made him a teenager and the man a full-fledged adult. It just felt like another bullshit story he was always telling. But sometimes I think back and wonder if there's any truth to it. I've told the story on here before. But a girl I worked with once told me about her first love. They dated for a while. Fell madly in love and lost their virginities to each other. Her family situation was weird. Her parents weren't married. But when her dad was in town, her parents were a couple and when he wasn't they weren't. Well, one of the times that he was in town, she introduced him to her boyfriend. They got along and got to talking and he asked about the kid's family. After the kid went home, her dad told her she couldn't see him anymore. Turns out he was the kid's father. She'd unknowingly fallen in love with and lost her virginity to her half-brother. And yes, I know this also happened on an episode of House. I was told this story back in 1999 before that show was a thing. My classmate in high school. I thought he was pretty weird but also a nice guy. Turned out he's bipolar and he manages it with medication. But one time he was off it and he lost control in an argument with his little brother. He ended up beating the living crap out of the poor kid. Once he regained his senses and realized what he did, he tried to kill himself. I'm not sure how. He didn't specify. His dad was also an abusive drunk douchebag who occasionally beat him up. He told the story pretty calmly. I really hope he's doing much better now. When I was about 10 years old, my mom told me that when she was 12 years old, she was in bed at night, She lived in Puerto Rico. She heard her mom and dad arguing in the kitchen. Her dad might have been drunk. I don't recall if my mom said. She heard her mom screaming and then go silent. Her dad had stabbed her mom to death. He went to prison. My mom and her siblings got adopted out to other families. This girl I worked with over the summer told me how she burnt down her high school. And we worked at a summer camp. None of the parents knew the girl watching their kids was a ducking arsonist. Excuse me, not everyone who sets their school on fire is an arsonist. Some people just knock over a Bunsen burner right onto a trash can. My wife told me that one of her cousins is actually a baby bought from another family member who was too young to keep the baby. Not really a secret, but it was something told to me once and then never discussed again. Close family friend had blocked some memories from her childhood, during which her grandfather did horrible things to her and her brother. She was fighting brain cancer as an adult and attributed her sickness in part to the repressed memories. I was told what happened to her, with details, and never shared it with anyone else. Use your imagination. It's worse than that. She died from cancer. People like that grandfather should be castrated and thrown to the wolves. Not as crazy as others. But I found out that my dad is actually my stepdad and my real dad left immediately after I was born. 18 years and still haven't met the guy. Except I kinda met my real dad. I was maybe 15 and he sent me a MySpace message from across the country just to tell me he was moving back to Pennsylvania and he'd like to meet me. I didn't know that my dad was my stepdad because he has been there since I was 3. I saw my real father once. We passed one another in the local grocery store and I heard him whisper to his wife, "That's my son," but he never tried to stop me or even talk to me. He kept up with the MySpace messages encouraging me to get lunch with him, but the man was a complete stranger to me. As soon as I was 18 the messages stopped until I was about 22 when he told me he was sorry for not being a parent. Told me I had 2 little brothers and a little sister. And lastly that he wants he and I to have a father-son relationship. I told him to be a better parent to those 3 than he was to me. Now 26. Haven't heard a peep. My cousin had her first daughter with an old friend from high school after a one-night stand. Turns out he is married and doesn't want the wife to know. My newest baby cousin is now about 3, I believe. No idea if his wife ever found out, but I'm the only one my cousin told. My sister-in-law doesn't think her 3rd child, 5 years old, is her husband's. They were broken up around the date of conception. The husband has brown hair, brown eyes, same with their first 2 children. The 3rd, the questionable one, has blonde hair, blue eyes. It's been a running joke so far. I honestly don't think the husband cares to know the truth at this point. The ducked up part? Sil has been caught texting other men. I think she stopped now, but she used to chat with her brothers, my husband, friend, who has blonde hair and blue eyes. Same rectangular head shape as the 3rd kid. He is around 6 feet 5 and questionable kid is huge for his age. The other ducked up part? My mother-in-law says she knows who the father is and it's not my husband's friend. It's whatever now, all mayo. I made an R4R post asking about secrets. A woman messaged me from a throwaway account. Deleted already. As a girl, she had sleepovers at her house all the time. Her father was well liked by parents and would spoil them with takeout and nail polish and whatnot. What actually happened is that come bedtime, her father would drug the girls, undress them, pose them with himself or each other, and take photos. If she didn't keep bringing girls over, her father would abuse her instead. I found that to be pretty disturbing. Or it could have been made up. That would be pretty disturbing too. Good friend of mine told me his father abused his sister. I think I was more shocked he didn't share this sooner. It wasn't until he had kids that it all came out. Family secrets are dark. Edit, Screeds. Chicago detective told me how they would wrap a dry cleaner bag over someone's face to get them to sign a confession. As any Chicago cop will tell you, a phone book doesn't leave bruises. It was in 6th grade. And I was about 11 years old at the time. A girl in my class had been missing from school for quite a while. We asked our teacher what the problem was, but she refused to answer. We then kind of just let it slide and didn't think about it anymore. A few weeks later, there was a story in the news about a 12-year-old girl who had been impregnated by a 39-year-old man. We joked around saying that it was probably her, until she finally came to class one morning and told everyone that it was true. I have literally never seen a classroom that silent before in my life. Woman I knew back in the 90s told me a story about how her ex-BF got her pregnant when she was 15. He didn't want to be a dad, so he threw her down a flight of stairs. Then he proceeded to violently grape her with a mop handle, bashing away at her womb as hard as he could. Then, just to make sure, he poured bleach into her vag. She said she can never have sex again without extreme pain, and she'll never have kids. Good news is, the dude went to prison for like 14 years. He was like 25 at the time, so he got time for the statutory rape as well as the excessively violent assault. Guys like that should just be fed to wild dogs. Though, save the state the cost of jailing them. Prison is just going to make them meaner. About 20 years ago, a member of my family was the principal teacher in a very small, rural elementary school. Well, the equivalent in the country where we live. One day she was informed by local school authorities that a school was to have a new student. He was an 11-year-old boy from elsewhere in the country who'd been accused of sexually assaulting two boys in his old school. It was an allegation, no more. She had no choice but to accept this boy into her school. But also, given he was a child himself and entitled to a presumption of innocence, she was also not allowed to inform parents of the allegation against him. In order to protect the other children in her class, a special teacher's assistant was required to be in his presence at all times. But again, she was not allowed to tell the children or their parents why this teacher's assistant was in their class. Leaving aside multiple ethical issues raised by all of this, can you imagine how stressful it was for my family member to have this kid in her class? Could you imagine if this kid did something to one of the kids in her class and the parents, many of whom were her lifelong friends, discovered my family member had known about the previous allegation and hadn't warned them? Fortunately, the whole thing had a happy ending. A co-worker had been friends with my roommates at one point. The guy who owned the house got his sister drunk one night after a basketball game. The team was over celebrating a big win. The story goes that he turned his wasted sister over to the team who ran a train on her. This was supposedly done so they would like him. When I was 12, my parents sent my older brother and I to go visit our aunt during summer break. One day out of the blue, my aunt pulls me aside and tells me that my dad had a family before us, but that his wife and baby had died during childbirth. She then told me not to tell anyone what she told me. It's been 10 years since then and I sometimes still think about what might have possessed her to tell a 12-year-old kid something like that. I still haven't told my mom or dad about it because I have no idea how to ask if it's even my right to ask. But sometimes I have this weird feeling that I imagined the whole thing or that my aunt could have lied to me about the whole thing. That my aunt offered to adopt me when me and my brother were born. My mom didn't like girls. Didn't want a girl. Made it clear that she only had me because I was in there with my brother, and by the time she knew I was a girl there wasn't much she could do. My mom originally told her yes, and was fully prepared to hand me over. But after backlash from the family, us kids and our dad never knew about any of this until very recently. She decided to keep me to keep up appearances, and then lied to everyone saying said aunt had tried to take me away because she was jealous my mom had babies and she couldn't. Aunt had had 4 miscarriages by this point. My life could have been so much different if I'd grown up with someone who actually wanted me and didn't actively hate my existence in their lives.